Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights. Here are your hosts, Hector Kolonas and Mike LaRosa.
It's another week, and so that means it's time for another weekly recap episode of the This Week in Coworking podcast. We're on week 18. Can't believe it. My name is Mike LaRosa. I'm joined here with my co-working host, Hector Kolonas, and we're also joined with Ken Loh from Nexudus. They are our sponsor for this week, so he's going to be jumping into all the fun, telling us about what they're up to, and dishing on some of the hot topics for the week. So we're going to be tackling a international banking brand that's going to be expanding their co-working cafe options. We're going to be talking about whether or not free co-working days work. Spoiler alert, I don't think they do, but there's plenty of time for debate on that. We're also going to be tackling about some developments in the overarching virtual mail, virtual office industry, touching upon a little bit of the news Nexus has for us, diving into, once again, some awesome co-working cafe data from Yardi, and what would be a recap if we didn't discuss Mr. Adam Neumann. We won't be taking that much time, but you might be wondering what he's been up to. Another round of investment for his Flow apartment startup. Hector, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Great to be here. I see I've got my other co-host in the corner joining me. She has decided to co-host with all of us today. But I'm doing great. Ken, how are you? How's the weather over in London?
Yeah, it's blisteringly hot. I think everyone's gone out to the park for lunch today. It's ice creams in the office. It's that kind of a weather.
Nice.
So we're all in good spirits.
I love that, but I also love the fact that when everyone else out for the pub and getting ice cream, you're sitting here talking co-working, geeking out about co-working stuff with all of us. So we highly appreciate you being here. We also highly appreciate Nexudus being the sponsor of this week's newsletter, this week's podcast. So massive thank you from all of us for making what we do possible. Before we dive into what you are actually sponsored or told people about through your sponsored slot, I did want to touch on the fact that you've also got a brand new website and a brand new brand, it looks like, rolling out this week. So huge congrats on that. Like, where did that come from? That was out of nowhere.
Thank you. I'm glad you noticed. Yeah, that's been on in the works for quite a fair bit. I think lots of reasons why we done our website, right? This is something that since I've joined Nexudus, I've really pushed for Nexudus to be one of those companies that reaches out to people, engages, does testing with people, and just gets better feedback of our products and our websites. And so I think hopefully you're seeing these types of changes, whether that's the marketing site or whether it's products or whether it's the virtual office feature that we're about to release. It's all a combination of like good design process that we're championing.
I love that. And I think the new marketing website, new branding is definitely elevating that game. You segued us to it quite nicely. You are releasing a brand new module, right? It's called the Virtual Offices module. Tell us a little bit more about what exactly that is all about.
Sure. Yeah. I think virtual offices is not a concept that is new. There have been lots of places that have been offering virtual offices to clients. And essentially, at the crux of it, it's offering services to a potential client where they want to have a mailing address or registered address at any particular location. So that's like a nutshell of this. But let's ask ourselves why people want this kind of things, right? So imagine yourself as a sort of fledgling startup. There's only the two of you. When you started, there's quite often these types of companies or these groups of people don't even have an office space. They don't need an office space. Everyone's happy to work remotely. But as things are progressing and evolving with these types of companies, they're going to need official and legal paperwork be sent into places. And we've seen there's a sort of growing need where people want to be associated with an address that's either reputable or prestigious. When we first thought about doing this, we started interviewing quite a few people who were already in the virtual office space or were thinking of going to the virtual office space, but were always reluctant or burdened by something, about the process. And it turns out our biggest finding was that it seems like it's a sort of low revenue, high effort kind of business, by which I mean there's a lot of operational workflow that's involved to facilitate virtual offices in a very non-efficient manual way. You think about when you first register with these operators, you'll have identity checks, compliance, due diligence, know your clients checks, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of that's very manual in the past, right? You've got to fill in forms. In the US, I know the US Postal Service does this with forms, but someone has to fill in those forms. Someone has to manually get photocopies of various documents and validate that they are accurate, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just the setting up. Once that's all set up, you have this sort of processing the mail that also can be quite inefficient. And so I think we spoke to a lot of people and we said, what if we could bring that entire cost down, right? What if we made things more efficient for everyone? What if we could do things like reduce all that manual work involved in sort of identity checks, right? We've got APIs, we've got third-party providers who can do stuff like this now. All we need to do is just build that into our process. And then that's less manual. It's a lot more automated for people. What if we did a streamlined workflow for mail management, right? For example, when mail comes in, some clients might want to scan letters and then discard them. Some might actually want to forward them to recipients. There's a lot of things that's, again, very manual. But if we could streamline that whole workflow, include as much automation, include as much defaulting where people know what to do without too much cognitive load, and bundle that into packages for people, right? I think that's what we've tried to do with Nexudus here. So our virtual office is a sort of single platform product. We are trying to make everything as efficient as possible for the operators. We are reducing the manual workflow. We've introduced automated identity checks using Stripe, and then we've improved the way we do mail handling altogether. Rather than paying for mail forwarding services and then integrating that with your space and still thinking about having to do all these manual work, we have one single thing. All the account management is done in one place. All the contracts and the plans that the operators get to send out to the membership plans that they're sending out to their clients, that's all done, built out of one platform. And then on top of that, it knows about virtual office, right? So it knows what to do. It's flexible enough to allow operators to have like bespoke charging prices, right? Or structures, I should say. So for example, if one of the membership plans wanted to by default include X amount of mail forwarding, they could put that as a perk in the plan, or they could say once a week, the client has to come into the office and collect that. And then all of that is defaulted into the workflow. There's an opportunity for operators to upsell their sort of real estate services as well, right? It's basically a new revenue source, potential new revenue source for these spaces.
That's really insightful, Ken. Why is Nexudus now investing in a virtual offices module when there are so many other options available for managing mail and managing mail services or managing virtual office services?
Excellent question. So I will answer that in two parts. So the first one, as I've teased, it's the reduction of manual effort and the streamlining. These are the kinds of stuff we heard back from the operators that was causing them a problem. So that's the first part of why I think that, Nexudus is a strong product there. But the second part as well, I also want to touch a little bit about the pricing structure that we're offering our operators. These companies tend to do one or two things. They either pay for a separate, very specific virtual mailing type service. There are quite a few out there, as you said, they already exist, but they pay that separately on top of something else that manages their workspace. And those two don't talk to each other. And then on top of that, you're literally just paying for two things. And then the third cost is all that sort of manual work that their operations team has to do more of. So I think what we've done here by putting everything in the same platform, we're offering something which I think that our pricing structure is competitive. We did do our research around competitive products, and we think we're offering something that, again, if we bring the cost down, not just from the manual effort, but also bring the cost down from the actual expenditures, then this is something potentially that operators are going to get more revenue.
It's definitely a growing part of the market. We're seeing so many operators reporting higher and higher revenues in their mail management side, in their virtual mail. As we all know, you can upsell it, right? There's an unlimited amount of virtual mail you can sell. What's also interesting for folks to realize is this is not Nexudus's first foray into mail management, right? You had Next Delivery. I was sitting in a co-working space that runs on Nexudus yesterday. I was just quizzing them. What are you currently doing for mail? Why don't you offer virtual mail? And it's all the things you said, right? They're not clunky, but it's a lot of work. They have to train their staff. They have to get compliant, all these things. One of the fun things that they did mention was we didn't have space to store all the mail. And I was like, well, we can't fix that with software, but there's a lot of things that can be fixed with software. And we're seeing a whole bunch of different moves. Glad to see Nexus kind of stepping in and taking a customer-led way into kind of building this product instead of just trying to figure out what spaghetti sticks to the wall. So I applaud you and your team for taking that approach. Just another note that in the newsletter this week, we did see another kind of mail related software update. We saw Sphere Mail being awarded 2 US patents. So it's still a lot of movements within kind of the virtual mail space. It's definitely a growing element. And I think whenever we get towards a market where people don't know where it's going to go, this idea of entrepreneurship goes up, self-employment goes up, virtual mailing goes up. And so I think it's going to be a sector that's very buoyant right now. I think a lot of operators are exploring how best they can get involved with that. So appreciating you sharing all that background with us. Mike, do you want to take us into the next? I think we can line up a really good segue here because Ken did mention that he was in fintech before this, right? So Mike, take us into the first story.
Yeah, so for those of you that have been tracking this trend for a long time now, banks have been wondering what to do with all of these branches that they have everywhere, right? Sometimes they feel like you see one across the street from the other, like Starbucks used to be. So Santander has announced that they are accelerating the transformation of these branches into what they're calling the work cafes. Capital One also has this concept here based here in the States. And so they said that as of last year, they operated 239 of these total work cafes. And so it's really fascinating to see that they've got that many open so far and that they're going to be plugging away and adding more in Argentina, Chile, Mexico, Brazil, Portugal, Poland, the UK, and of course the US, pretty much anywhere Santander has a strong presence. So it's exciting to see that they're moving forward with it. And it's just another kind of signal that co-working or space to be productive or workspace as a service or whatever you want to call it is being included in different offerings to different folks for different needs from different brands. So just all in all, I think it's a rising tide lifting this little ship, the USS Twick.
I think, can I just say what I love so much about hearing about this? And you're right, I came from finance, fintech, and back in the day when I was working there was a lot of emphasis on making things efficient, driving costs down, as we all do, right? That's how we generate profit. What I like about them is there's a tendency or almost a reaction for us to just like close branches off and just get rid of things and reduce the cost that way. And I think there's a lot of banks going down that path of selling their real estate, closing down spaces, what have you. What's interesting is this a completely different approach, right? This is like saying, okay, we have the space. Why don't we try to get some money out of this? So rather than reducing the cost, literally increase the revenue. And because, as we all know, I think that the sort of co-working space is something that is also increasing in its demand. I think they might be onto something here that other banks might just catch up to.
Yeah, it's just really an interesting shift. We have seen Virgin Money do the same thing in the UK. We saw, as Mike said, Capital One do this. We've seen quite a few, I think I've even seen some co-ops and like local banks starting to do this. It's really shifting that mentality of you don't need to walk up to a teller anymore, right? No one's really walking in with wads of cash. And if they are, we're going to private banking anyway. The idea of a bank has changed. I think like fintech had a lot to do with that. A lot more banking is done from our phones. So then what does that mean for the physical space? And over the last couple of weeks, we've obviously looked at different other sectors where it's like Saks tried this. They didn't need some people coming into their stores. Could they turn those into co-working spaces? Can they turn those into kind of these community hubs that kind of drive this footfall? Because the one thing that co-working is great at is getting people to congregate, right? It's like the new community hubs, and you can build a brand around that, which is just also really interesting because I was having a conversation last week, I think it's mentioned in the newsletter as well, is this juggle of banks wanting to partner and or sponsor co-working spaces. And this is just another avenue of that, whereas instead of sponsoring the local co-working space, they turn their existing retail venue into a co-working space or co-working-like space, third space. But my question then is, why are they not just bringing in the experienced operators to run these spaces for them? Because I've been into some of these co-working spaces, or at least the Capital One cafes. I love the fact that as a card holder, I get really good $1 coffee in New York is unheard of. So I'm a very big fan of that. But I don't think I'd ever work there because it's missing something. And I'm like a co-working snob, excuse me. But it's a slightly different type of workspace, but it's good to introduce people to the concept of going somewhere that isn't home, isn't an office, isn't your employer's office, or isn't just a coffee shop per se. So I think it's a middle ground, is a good introductory piece. But I think that also lines us up to another link that we shared this week. And this is some thoughts for you, Colleen, over at Coco, where there is this very popular trend of giving away co-working to introduce people to the experience of co-working. Now, whether it's a co-working day, co-working week, a co-working month, a free day pass, whatever it is, there is this idea of if you give it away, they'll try it, they'll like it, they'll stay, or they'll join. And what Colleen actually looks at is when they gave it away for free, i.e. the product, the co-working product, people automatically ignored the objections that they had when it came to paying for a membership. Things like there's no parking nearby, there's nowhere to eat around here, I don't feel safe. But when it was free, suddenly the space was full. So it was a very good kind of looking in the mirror, really, of, okay, is it the product value that we need to think about? Or is it just the fact that people will do anything for free X? So I know, Mike, you teased that you don't believe that free co-working days work. I'm going to let you tee it up. I disagree with you, but I'll let you go for it first.
So I don't, it's not that I don't think that they don't work at all, but based on the last conversation, the last topic we were just talking about, like you're giving away something for free as a special co-working day down the street. Santander Work Cafe or Capital One Cafe is giving it away for free as just part of their offering. And so sure, there are some people that are going to want a little bit more than a Work Cafe or a Capital One Cafe, whatever, but they're willing to pay for that. I don't believe in free. I worked in co-working spaces. If I had someone walk in off the street, I'd welcome them to stay and enjoy the rest of their visit on us. I wasn't saying, oh, when you come back the next day, let me give you another free day. And I never really saw a lot of traction with drawing people in with the premise of a free day. Come on in, your first day is free for us. Okay, that's fine. That's no different than just when they walk in and you offer it as and you make them feel a little bit more special. When they see it blasted on an ad or a paper leaf out, free co-working doesn't make them feel any special. What I do think, though, and I'm glad that you referenced this in the piece and a link to a past resource, is I've participated as an attendee and as a operator in citywide type co-working initiatives, marketing initiatives. I remember in Thailand, they did this cool thing called the Co-working Carnival. And it was basically like a bar crawl, but for co-working. And they took advantage of another really cool event that was going on within the city, and people could bop around, and they weren't necessarily bopping to do emails in a different space, but each space had something different for them to do, a different activity or a different tchotchke, or if you completed all of them, you got a shirt or whatnot. So, free co-working's fine, but every time I talk to an operator, whether it be as a consultant or as someone that we're onboarding to our software or whatever, they will go, oh, I'm going to do a free co-working. And I just always encourage them, like, what can we do that's a little bit different? And I think that the notes that we shared in the post this week were in line with that. Like, I'm not against it, but I think that you can't just put a sticker on as a free co-working day and then think that it's really going to drive a lot of folks to your space.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to actually take it one level further. And in fact, I said I was going to disagree with you, but I ended up agreeing with you. I agree to just giving away, blanket, because but one of the hardest things to do in any business is sell someone from free to paid. It's much easier to sell someone who paid $1 for something to $100 than it is to pay $0 to $1. That's just fundamental psyche of selling. It's very hard to do that. So if they perceive the value to be zero, you're going to struggle. And I would love one day to dig into Nexudus data, approximately, and all the data over the systems that do offer free trials or free day passes, or they somehow are allowing people to try it. What is that conversion rate looking like? Is it 0.1%? Is it 10%? I would love to dig into that. But yeah, Ken, I know Nexus offers this kind of functionality. What are your thoughts around kind of free co-working?
I'm going to come from a different angle altogether. While you were talking about this, I started thinking about gyms for some reason. This is a tried and tested model for gyms, right? They'll offer you guest passes. People come in, use the treadmill, go to the sauna, that kind of stuff. But what I was thinking a little bit more about from the psychological aspect of this is the perception of the value when there's more people in that space, right? So let's say a space has like a average occupancy of something, but you're offering a little bit more free passes. And so on any given day, the average occupancy might have just increased ever so slightly. And if by chance that's the day that you're showing off, you're giving a tour to a big client and say, wow, look at this. And everyone's like just looking around and go, this is very impressive. It seems so busy. I feel that, again, everyone's different. I get it. But like when I walk into a gym and I see that there's a vibe, then there is a vibe. And there's a little bit of I think that's where the value of giving the free passes is not necessarily just a conversion. I'm sure there will be some conversion, but I also think that secondary or tertiary type thing where just like filling the space up is also equally attractive for them.
That is actually an interesting thought. Like you definitely took me on a different tangent, because I see companies like Cohatch and others where they have entire scholarship, and I think WorkBuy does as well. They have entire scholarship programs, which are great. They give them to nonprofits, they give it to like startups, they give it to underrepresented founders. But what that's actually doing is filling space, right? It's filling the space with people who want to be there, but maybe they can't afford it. They're not at the right step yet. Should be a nonprofit, maybe they're not allowed to buy an office, whatever. And that plays into that second one. But I want to go back to what Mike was saying a little bit earlier, and it's not about the co-working product being free. It's about creating an experience that you tie to your co-working space. Because yes, you can go to the Work Cafe, you can go to the Capital One Lounge, whatever it is, but something in your space is what your members are coming there for, and making that the thing you give the taste to is more important. Going back to the whole fundamentals of experiential marketing, it's not about just giving away free sodas in the subway. It's about tying that to how does that soda supposed to make you feel. If you're giving away energy drinks in the morning and it's healthy, that making that experience felt is the difference between a great experiential campaign and a giving away free stuff. I think that operators should really think about how are they going to can what makes them their aha moment, so that people can experience that in the free day pass or free day. But also going back to the tech side where we all live and play, how are you capturing and nurturing those leads so that you're getting something for something? Whether it's, okay, I didn't want to sign up because X is valuable data, right? If the parking is an issue and you hear that enough times, you go and form a partnership to give parking, right? If you keep hearing there's not got enough food options, you partner with a local catering company to bring food in, right? So getting that nose is actually valuable to you. But on the flip side, if you know that they've come and every month you could do a meetup where you can, as Ken said, bring them in strategically when you're doing tours on a Friday, for example, or a quiet day of your space, you build it into your strategy so you can get something for the day pass. So I do think you have to think about the experience, what your kind of aha moment is, but also that real data side of it. How do you use this to build a better, stronger, more resilient business, even though you're giving away something for free? Talking about data, we have some very interesting data sets, once again, from the team out at CoworkingCafe and Yardi. They shared their latest quarterly update for the US market. For the first time, they've actually expanded from 25 markets. They usually track to now 50 of the largest markets in the US. Just some of the rough numbers that they've shared. The US has now reached over 7,840 co-working spaces. That's 2% up quarter on quarter from last year. Interestingly enough, that is 400 million square feet of additional co-working space added last quarter, which is a 3% increase quarter on quarter from last year, with South Florida Coast seeing a 10% increase, and Brooklyn, which is something we can talk about a little bit, another 8% increase in growth. Outside of that, we saw San Antonio seeing 18% in the number of square footage or the amount of square footage covered, hitting a number of 850,000 square feet. And Chicago is now one of the largest with a 16% increase in the amount of square footage covered. So quite remarkable numbers, but there's one more thing I wanted to touch on here, and that's the pricing. We saw pricing stay flat across the quarter, with dedicated desks and open plans staying steady at around $300, $200, and $149 respectively per month. But what we did see was virtual office pricing across the US go from $120 median to $149. A nice, healthy growth, going back to what we all discussed earlier in this call, that there is this growing demand, and just a good signal of this jump in demand for remote business infrastructure. Gentlemen, what do you think about those numbers? It's great to see a curve going up, even if it is a slight 2% increase on kind of total number of spaces. I think it's a pretty good, strong result from this quarter, given the rest of the economy.
Yeah, the two numbers that jumped out at me, I feel it's like a tale of two cities. So I know that there's insane growth going on in San Antonio, specifically because of its co-location or closeness, proximity to Austin. A lot of folks can't sustain prices in Austin. They're moving southward. The airport in San Antonio is blowing up, just rapid growth. But for me, what was fascinating was I think San Antonio, if just from what I know and not being from there, I think it's really accurate, true, honest demand generated growth. But when I see how large Chicago increased, knowing how saturated that market already is, I would love at one point to get the folks from Yardi on here to talk about where these data points are coming from specifically, because what I see in Chicago, that tells me that's a ton of vacant space that landlords have now just dumped onto the co-working market, and that they've either not been able to churn that traditionally triple net leased offices, or they had I mean, I've toured floors in Chicago where all the tenants just abandoned furniture. We're talking millions of dollars of furniture sitting on each floor, that it was worth more to them to write it off as a loss than it was to remove it. And so it would be interesting to find out what type of space hit the market to drive that 16% increase in Chicago. Because Chicago prices have always been a little bit lower. Benjamin Diet from Grind, I quote him forever on this. This quote's probably 10 years old, but he said that the steepest competition for him when he opened Grind in Chicago was the affordable 2-bedroom apartment, because people were turning that second bedroom into an office. So it'd be interesting, I think, just my warning, or my, not, I don't want to say warning because that is ominous, but I would encourage operators to take into consideration that very soon, if not already, you're not going to see an increase in competition necessarily from other full service operators. You're just going to start seeing these landlords dumping inventory into a marketplace, whether that be CoworkingCafe or DeskPass or an Uplex or Hubble or whatever it be. And that just might be a new type of space that you're going to be competing against.
The only insight I was going to try to share, which is more like a sort of international space. Like, I think it's great you're talking about all the US cities and stuff. I'm curious what the European cities and the Far East as well would be like. And anecdotally, I was actually just in Malaysia a couple of weeks ago, went out to see some of our clients. We were talking to them about what is the vibe there too. And there's growth there too. One of our clients was just like literally talking to me about like how they're opening up a new location, a fairly large new location as well. The other one is saying, but yeah, they've got midterm plans. They haven't really secured it just yet, but it's just growing in Asia. We were speaking to people in Australia and New Zealand as well. Interesting stuff. Yeah, I'd love to see some of this data include all the other places too, really.
Absolutely. And for folks who are wondering where they can get that kind of data, just subscribe to This Week in Co-working. As soon as we gather that data from everywhere else in the world, we do share it on a kind of weekly basis as and when it comes out. I think last 2 weeks ago, we actually shared some data out of the APAC region, comparing average desk rates, some growth there. We are doing a complete mini-series into the Australian market that's dropping in the next couple of weeks. So definitely keep an eye on the newsletter for that. Or if you want to have an early preview, head over to unpackingapac.com. That is a new mini-series coming up this week in co-working, diving really into some of those regions where we don't really hear the data from that often. So definitely check that out as well. So there's a few other mentions. There's a few other notable mentions that I think we have to touch on. I know we're hitting it towards the end of our time together this week. On the one hand, two completely different stories, but somehow related if you look very closely and squint a bit and take a lean back. But we saw a activist artwork, I would say, piece launched in Brooklyn this week called a co-working space for chatbots or AI chatbots, where it's a whole bunch of cardboard cutouts of little robots and automata moving within a space with an advert on the front saying affordable co-working space, only $1,000 a month. Really started a whole bunch of conversations here on the East Coast around, what it's all about. And the artist actually came out and said that it's a kind of a symbolism of the fact that AI is taking away a lot of the creative jobs of the folks that would normally be in a co-working space, designers, illustrators, animators. These folks are now being replaced in some way by AI tools. So a really deep message. The thing that made me smirk a little bit is that co-working was being used to make a point, which means we're in the mainstream now, right? It's something that people can identify. Kids are walking past, they know what a co-working space is. Millennials, older folks kind of taking photos. That means people know what co-working is. So I'm going to take that as a bit of positive news out of that story. And then we also flipping over to, I think it's UAE. We just saw another funding round in Adam Neumann's newest project called Flow. We saw a piece this week hitting a bit at the kind of selling points and positioning of it. I'm not going to dig too deeply into that, but definitely go and hit kind of week 18 in the newsletter on thisweekincoworking.com. Dig into that and let us know what you think. One thing I do want to remark on that topic is the amount of money raised in this round. I've set a lot of female founders in our industry for the right reasons. Cumulatively, they all raised less than this round. And that is just something we have to address. Not right now on this podcast, but something that has to be addressed. Just that the funding gap is there. But to round us off for the week, we did also have 10 market moves from across 10 different regions. I'm not going to read all of them off, but if you're interested in what's happening in Berlin, Reading, Japan, Chicago, Manchester, Adelaide, Spain, Calgary, Vancouver, and inside Belgium, head over getthisweekincoworking.com, subscribe for free. And as always, take care of yourselves out there. Thank you, Ken and Mike, for joining me on this adventure today. I look forward to being in your podcast feed same time next week.